Welcome back to TechRadar. I'm Mark Wilson, Cameras Editor.
And I'm Matt Phillips, TechRadar's video producer, and Mark has recently been reviewing the Sony ZV-1. I almost mucked that up. I almost said ZV-1, because I think that sounds better.
For some reason, I've been calling it the NV1, and it's taken me a long time to try and change that. But yes, ZV1 or ZV1.
All the phones, laptops, cameras we talk about, they've all got too crazy names. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. But we are talking about the Sony ZV-1 today. Mark's reviewed it. The full review is up on site, so if you want to go click there and watch that, all the links are in the description and stuff like that. But I was particularly interested in this camera. Obviously, Sony are touting this camera as their vlogging camera. So I guess design-wise, Mark, what does that mean? How is this different design-wise to other Sony cameras, and what sets this apart as the vlogging camera, if you like?
Well, it's heavily based on the Sony RX100 series, right. But there's a few features that all vloggers really want from a vlogging camera, and none of the RX100 really combined all of those in one camera. So this one does most of that, really. So the main thing really is it's got a nice side flipping screen, which that's the first time a Sony camera's had one. That's particularly good for vlogging because it then frees up the top and the bottom for, well, certainly the top for accessories, and the bottom for your tripod if you want to use a tripod. So that's really useful. The other big addition really is a microphone input, which you really want your sound to match the video quality, and really the only way to do that still is with an external mic. So that's a really useful addition as well. And they've gone for the same lens as the RX100 Mark V. So that's a 24 to 70 millimeter equivalent lens, which the most recent RX100 cameras have got a slightly longer dimmer lens. So that's a 24 to 200 millimeter. If you're vlogging, you don't really need long zoom. You want a brighter lens because you can get a nice background separation. So that's another choice for vloggers, really. So there's another couple of other good features. It's got a hotshoe on top, which means you can mount a microphone. With the other RX100s, you had to faff around a little bit with a bracket to try and figure out how to mount a microphone, but that's handy. And it's got a better built-in microphone than the previous RX100 cameras. It's a three-directional capsule microphone. It's still not as good as an external microphone. It's kind of, if you really want the audio to match your video, then you want to use that microphone input.
Yeah, like I was going to say, that external microphone also is kind of a requirement because it gives you more versatility, right? I know the microphone on the ZV-1 is pointing sort of out the same way the lens is, if you like. So if you're filming yourself, great, that's going to work relatively well on a non-windy day and stuff like that. But if you're behind camera trying to shoot something and you want to narrate that or whatever, all of a sudden the microphone's pointing the wrong way, right? So it's going to cause some issues there. So like you say, external microphone is probably still the way to go with these.
It is, but it also comes with a windshield, which is very useful because if you've got any sort of wind, it also makes it look like it's got sort of lockdown hair, which I quite like.
Don't we all? Yeah, exactly.
That's how we're all feeling at the moment. But that really, you need that for shooting outside, because it does obviously pick up wind noise when you're outside, but you won't need that inside, obviously, if you're shooting like for product reviews for YouTube. But
exactly. And so speaking of sort of vlogging and pointing the camera at yourself, you mentioned we got this flippy out screen. I know sort of, like you said, previous Sony cameras have either flipped up or down. Some have had touchscreen capabilities, some haven't. So where are we with this one? How useful is that flippy out screen, the way it works on the ZV-1?
It's useful in the sense of its articulation, but it's still not touch sensitive. Well, it is touch sensitive, but not fully in terms of the menus. So you can tap to focus on subjects if you want to just tap to a product you've got on screen, but you can't tap through the menus. So it's still a bit annoying in that respect because it's really designed for someone who's coming from a phone, and if you're coming from a phone, that feels quite limited.
Yeah, for sure.
What you're used to in apps.
Of course.
But the most important thing is that side flipping articulation, and that is useful because being able to see yourself while filming is something you can't really do very easily on other cameras like a GoPro. So
and sort of speaking of the GoPro, I know you've done some tests, so we'll show all that footage now, but stabilization is obviously a big deal with these sorts of cameras when you're out about walking around filming yourself. So how does the stabilization, in your experience, how did the stabilization compare between the GoPro, this, and maybe, like you say, people coming from their smartphones?
Yeah, it's good. It's definitely better than previous Sony RX100s. It's not quite as good as GoPro's Hyper Smooth or using a gimbal. So it depends a bit what you want from your video. When I tested it, if you're walking around, you really want to use active steady shot stabilization, which is the highest form of stabilization it offers. But the slight downside with that is it crops a little bit on your footage. So
that makes sense,
the 24mm focal length is already, it could be relatively narrow for some people. When you crop into that a little more, then it's a little bit tight. So you might want to bear that in mind. I mean, I personally think it's better to focus more on the face and not have too much background in the shot if you're vlogging, because that can be distracting. So I found it perfectly fine. But yeah, going back to the stabilization, I think it's definitely improvement, and it's definitely fine for walking around. It's just doesn't quite have that sort of floating stabilization you get with Hypersmooth or using a gimbal like the Osmo Mobile 3, which I used it. I compared it to. So yeah, I mean, I think the option, if you really want the best of all worlds, is probably to combine this with a gimbal, and you would then get the great video quality of this and the better stabilization of using a gimbal.
Yeah, makes sense. And I know that they've been advertising this camera with not a gimbal, but a sort of tripod hand stick that has some controls on it.
That's right. Yeah.
So how does that help significantly with sort of framing up, and would you recommend that that's sort of a necessary purchase along with this, or sort of handheld, does it work just as well?
Yeah, it doesn't really offer much in terms of any stabilization benefit, but it's useful. I wouldn't say it was essential, but the benefit is it's got a movie record start button on it, so it's much easier than trying to delve into the settings if you're shooting to camera. You can also zoom with it, and it's got the custom button on there as well. So yeah, it's nice. It doesn't extend at all though, which would be useful, because as it is relatively tight, it would be nice to have the option to just go out that little bit further if you want to get more of your background in shot.
Yes.
So that's something to bear in mind. It doesn't do that, but I found it certainly a useful addition, but if a little bit pricey probably. But
Sure. Yeah. And obviously a main thing I know a lot of vloggers are looking for in their cameras is autofocus, and Sony's iDetect autofocus is one of the best out there. So how does it work on this camera? Does it work in all shooting modes? Are there any restrictions to it? And how have you found it in your testing?
It's really good. I mean, it's the best on a compact camera by quite some distance. I mean, the main benefit is that it has its hybrid autofocus, so it combines phase detect and contrast detect autofocus. So it's really fast, and it doesn't hunt at all. And also it has Sony's face and eye autofocus, so the latest versions of that, and that is really sticky. I mean, you don't really have to think about focusing with this camera much. So I think that autofocus system combined with the 1-inch sensor and that bright lens, that's a really nice combination. It doesn't have animal IAF, so yeah, if you're a pet vlogger, then
yeah, well, they're out there for sure. They're definitely out there, so it's something to consider. And then sort of in regards to other focusing modes, I know that they have, and this is something I don't quite understand, so I might be wrong. They have something called a product review mode, something like that. Product showcase mode.
It probably should be called product review mode. Yeah, product showcase is the slightly more fancy name. Yeah, that's a mode really for YouTubers who do a lot of product reviews, because the frustration is when you do that, if you're focusing on yourself and then you bring a product into the frame, it might not focus on that.
Yeah, or it hunts between the two and then the background. Yeah.
That's always a fun game. So the benefit of this is it really, if you bring a product in front of the lens, between you and the lens, it will focus on that and then focus back on your face when you take it away. So it's quite a nice feature.
When I watched your example of it, which obviously we'll cut in here, but I was really impressed with how quick and well it worked. You know, you sort of see these features relatively often, and they never quite work as you'd hope. But this seems like it really does. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it makes it a little bit more usable for people who don't want to delve into settings too much and yeah, faff around with those. So it's one button, and it doesn't do a huge amount. You could still achieve this in a more roundabout way, but it's a nice quick way to change into that mode. Yeah,
exactly. And like you say, if you're a vlogger and you're a one-man operation, that's exactly what you want, right? You want that ease and speed to just work as it should, which is great. So there's one other sort of focusing thing that I didn't quite understand, having briefly looked at the camera, which was defocusing mode. So as far as I'm aware, sort of when you're at 24 millimeters, you've got 1.8 aperture. Defocus mode blurs the background even more, right, to give you more of a depth of field. Is that correct?
It can't really go beyond the widest aperture, but it does. It allows you to blur the background while you're filming. So if you wanted to get some of the scene behind you in shot and then blur it out, you can do that. So it's sort of a shortcut for while you're filming. It doesn't mean you get any really extra background blur. It doesn't do any like computational stuff like a phone would, but yeah, it's another sort of quick thing to do while you're filming, as opposed to setting that up beforehand.
I'm with you. It makes sense now. So then finally, I guess the one thing we should probably touch on is sort of the extra modes that it has, right? So it records in 4K and has several slow motion modes. So how have you found those sorts of modes and switching between them and using them?
Yeah, because I mean the slow motion modes are handy. I think you get three options really. You get 250 frames a second, 500, or 1,000. I've generally found that those last two, there's quite a big quality loss and resolution loss. So I would really probably stick to the 250, but that's pretty nice. The only downside is you get quite a short recording length, so you can only do that for a few seconds,
right?
So you got to set it up quite nicely. It might be a few trial runs to make sure you get the right shot.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously this is a nice small compact camera, and we're seeing on the website at the moment a massive increase in popularity of webcams, and webcams are actually relatively difficult to get at the moment. And I've heard rumors that Sony are going to introduce some software updates for this so that it will work like a webcam. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So they're going to release a live streaming software for PC only, it looks like, to begin with, from July. So that's en route. Canon's done something similar for its cameras. The G7X Mark III lets you live stream to sites like YouTube out of the box. So, cool. But it's good that this is coming to the ZV-1. Because that's another big boon for YouTubers.
Yeah, for sure. Like you say, you have the one camera there and then can do almost everything, right? And you can have your setup ready to go, and you just clip it onto a tripod, and your live streaming setup's ready to go, and then take it out and about with you when you vlog. Yeah. Ideal.
Exactly.
Ideal.
Or if you need a webcam as well, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. I know obviously this camera is shooting 4K as well, if you want that option. But are there any recording limits on that? How does that work?
Yeah, so by default there is a recording limit, about 5 minutes if you're in 4K, but you can turn off this setting called auto power off temp. So that allows you to really shoot unlimited 4K until the battery runs out or your card fills up, which is more likely. So yeah, so that's quite handy if you want to shoot extended clips. It gets pretty hot, but Sony says there's no danger of it damaging the camera.
Really interesting.
So yeah, so that's
if that's the case, I wonder why by default they would have that 5 minute record limit. I mean, I suppose they think that most vloggers certainly aren't shooting for more than 5 minutes at a time, but that would seem strange that they would have a setting in there that doesn't cause any damage if you turn it off, but by default it's on.
It's it's safety first, really. It does get quite hot, so I guess trying to prevent any burnt hands, but I didn't really find it to be get too hot. Even I did a 45-minute unlimited clip, and it was warm, but it wasn't like I couldn't hold it. So,
fantastic stuff. And sort of speaking of battery life, there you just touched on it there, but how long are we expecting on batteries for this, sort of, if we are going to be doing that continuous recording, and do you think it's sort of in range, I guess, with other cameras out there in sort of the same area?
Yeah, it is. It's in the ballpark of similar cameras, of compact cameras. So it's naturally a small battery. So you get 45 minutes of 4K recordings. So yeah, that's fairly standard for a compact camera. So yeah, that is something to bear in mind. You probably will want to buy maybe a spare battery. You can power it with through the micro USB port and use the camera at the same time. So there is that option, but that is a limitation to bear in mind.
Yeah, for sure. And so it's out right now, the RV1. We gave it 4.5 stars on site. It's what, 750 quid, something like that, is that right?
It's ZV1. It's 699 in the UK, $749 in the US. That's an introductory price. So yeah.
Fantastic stuff. And so this is sort of in your recommendation then, would you say that this is a great step up from people who are vlogging with their iPhone currently or the smartphone currently, and this is sort of that next step up?
I think it is, I mean, smartphones smartphones have tried to, it's not very easy for smartphones to do that. So at the moment, the video quality you get from something like the ZV-1 is superior. And I think it is the best compact vlogging camera. There's the Canon G7X Mark III as well to consider, but this does beat it in a few areas, particularly autofocus. It's slightly more expensive, but I would pay that extra for the ZV-1. Yeah. Well,
there you go. Sony are claiming it's the best vlogging camera, and that seems to be what TechRadar thinks too.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Thanks for joining me, Mark. I appreciate that. If you want to see other videos just like this one, you can click around on screen. I'm sure YouTube's picked out some that it thinks you might like. Remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our future content. And for all the latest tech news and reviews, head over to techradar.com.